So it looks like we are still short a few council members for quorum, but Ashley, how's it looking? Are we good to go?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'll give it one more minute.
Mierta, I see that, excuse me, I see Ryan Sudbury from the city attorney's office is in the attendees, and we might promote him to panelist if that's what he is interested in.
Yeah, Ashley, could you do that for me?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Okay, we are gonna get going because this is an interesting item on our agenda, and I think we should give it as much time as we can. So good afternoon. I am gonna call the Public Works Committee to order, and we continue to meet via Zoom. But please know there are many ways to participate or that you can be engaged in all the council meetings. If you're joining us via Zoom and you would like to provide public comment, please use the raise and lower hand feature, and we'll call on you to provide comment. Thank you, Ashley. And if you're participating by phone, you can raise and lower your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. You can always leave a voice message for the entire council by calling 406-552-6012, and you can email city council members at council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And all these meetings are recorded and can be accessed via YouTube and MCAT. So with that, if we could get a roll call, please, for attendance.
Anderson,
She's absent.
Becerra,
Present.
Contos, Harp,
Present.
Hess,
Present.
Jones,
Present.
Merritt,
Present.
Ramos, Cheryl,
Present.
Vasika, Von Lossberg, West. Thank you.
Thanks. So it looks like we still don't have quorum. And so, am I counting right? Yeah, so we will wait approval of minutes until the end. I'll make a note to do that until we have quorum. Let's see. Let's take public comment on items not on the agenda. I don't see anyone besides MCAT on our attendee list, so I'll assume no public comments. And we can move right along to our first and only item on the agenda, and that is the Flynn Lowney ditch acquisition. Jeremy, take it away.
Thank you. Jeremy Keene, I'm the Director for Public Works and Mobility. Hopefully you're all seeing my screen. So this is an informational presentation today. It's an exciting opportunity we've been working on in Public Works for the past 6 or 8 months. There's no decision today, but this is a preview of where we're headed, and we're interested to hear your feedback and questions. So Public Works has been working on the Mull and Build project, and the Flynn Lowney Ditch is part of the area that we're working on. So just as a little bit of background, the Flynn Lowney Ditch is owned by the Hellgate Valley Irrigation Company. It provides irrigation water from the Clark Fork River to ag lands in the Sutupcane Mullen Road area. And in recent years, the irrigation ditch has become more expensive to maintain. The ditch company is struggling to get water into the ditch, particularly late in the season. And they have a declining number of active irrigators that are using the water from the ditch. So the irrigation diversion is just downstream of the railroad trestle, across from the Civic Stadium. This has been long a concern for fish entrapment. They get caught in the ditch and don't find their way back out. This affects some endangered species like bull trout. And it also affects the river in terms of the disturbance that happens at the diversion. So the irrigation company needs to get in there every couple of years and add additional material, rocks, boulders, sometimes concrete jersey barriers to get the water to the ditch. And that's also causing some problems with the main channel of the river. It's pushing the channel more towards the south bank. We've got a pretty significant erosion problem happening right along the trail adjacent to the stadium. We're worried about losing the trail. And it also creates some pretty fast water moving along the boat ramp at Silver Park, which is right here. The ditch runs under Russell Street and out to Mullen Road in a large culvert. This is a long-term maintenance issue that culvert has to be maintained in order to keep sediment out of the pipe to keep the water flowing. Then it runs along Mullen Road, and this creates some access issues and some safety issues for those properties along Mullen. The access requires added cost of large culverts or bridges to get to those properties, and this affects one of the projects that's going in there now. The Trinity Affordable Housing Project is going to be right here, and they have to build a new bridge across the ditch. The ditch also causes some constraints within the right-of-way for trails, sidewalks, or future road widening. And a large irrigation ditch like this alongside a road creates hazards for vehicles should they run off the road. And anytime you have a ditch, a water attraction, it's a concern for kids that may be attracted to that water and want to play in the ditch. When we get out to the Mullen Sutupcane area, we run into some interesting groundwater issues. So the ditch is actually charging the groundwater in that area, and that makes storm drainage more difficult, more expensive. And it also creates some issues with basements and potential for flooding of those basements in that area. And then on top of that, we added the Build Grant project, and you can see the red lines are where we're building those new road corridors, and we have two major crossings of the ditch and a couple of minor crossings that we have to deal with. And that same groundwater issue also affects the Build project in terms of the amount and complexity of storm drainage infrastructure that we have to build. So we, in discussing the Mullen Build project with the ditch company, Public Works broached the idea of acquiring the rights to the Flynn Lowney ditch. And this was based on really the costs of the Mullen Build project. There's a couple of different ways that, like I said, that the ditch impacts the project. Those large, expensive culverts represent about $625,000 of cost. And the additional storm drain infrastructure, both what we're doing in the first phase of the project and what will happen in later phases, rough order of magnitude, $1 million of additional storm drainage. So it's a significant cost for the Build project. So the accepted offer that we worked out with the Hellgate Valley Irrigation Company, which is contingent on council approval and allows for due diligence and some fundraising to occur over the next 6 months. It establishes a price to acquire the rights to the ditch. It converts existing ditch users to irrigation wells. So this is a more reliable way of getting water to those properties that are still irrigating. And those water rights would be converted to use for groundwater for wells. And there's also compensation in the agreement for the folks that have water rights but are no longer using those water rights. It establishes a 6-month timeline for us to take a closer look at this, to really do our homework, and also raise some additional funding to make this happen. It's not a done deal yet. And like I said, we'll come back to City Council for final approval. So the acquisition is really a unique opportunity to do a lot of things. We focused on what the impacts were to the build project, but we quickly realized that there are a lot of other benefits to trying to decommission this ditch. So we reduced the cost of build, and also development costs in that Sutupcane area. So the same issues with groundwater affect all the other developers out there and cause increased costs, both in crossing the ditch and dealing with the groundwater issues and storm drainage. It's also a big opportunity to reduce those impacts of the diversion structure on the river. And that's both the fish habitat, fish entrapment, and just general erosion and sediment in the river. Protection of existing infrastructure. We're really concerned about the trail. We're concerned about what happens if we lose the trail, because the stadium is right behind that. And we've got infrastructure in Silver Park and the boat ramp in that area that would also become more at risk as that bank continues to erode. It gives the opportunity to still maintain the ag uses that are happening in the Mullen Road area, and reduces the cost of maintenance for those irrigators. Decommissioning the ditch and removing the diversion structure also really creates some interesting opportunities for river safety, for access, for other recreational opportunities. We'd like to see better access to the river for all users, including folks that are disabled and need ADA access. The boat ramp is particularly challenging. You have to be a pretty good oarsman to get your raft into that eddy and take out there. So creating a better eddy for that ramp. There's long been discussion about a kayak play wave, the Max Wave project, that is really limited and constrained by what can happen in the river and the impact on fish. And we've recently made investments on the Broadway Island in terms of getting access with a couple of bridges and a path. And we'd really like to see more public use of that island, and hopefully address some of the less desirable uses that are happening out there with transient camping and drug use and things like that really make that area less safe. So just getting more folks out there, those principles of SEPTED, which is really just another way of saying eyes on the park, that when you have more people, you tend to have better behaviors as well. It also gives us an opportunity to work on new water wells in the Mullen Road, Sutupcane area. We've identified in our water CIP the need for 1 or 2 additional wells in that area as that area develops. And so acquiring the ditch gives us the ability to work on that. Could involve transferring some of the rights from the ditch to those water wells, but more than anything else, it allows us to start working on that process of identifying and putting in test wells that will ultimately result in development of new production wells for the water system. And then the remaining water rights from the acquisition can go back to in-stream flow. And this is something that's of high interest to the agencies and nonprofits that work on river issues, and being able to convert what's probably going to be about 40 cubic feet per second of water back to the Clark Fork River is a real benefit for the river and for fish habitat, fish function. We think there's some other opportunities that could come out of this too. The ditch encumbers land that could be used for housing. There are areas where the city owns land underlying the ditch that could be used for park or green space. There are opportunities for stormwater management and possibly trail connectivity that could come out of this. So there's a number of other projects that can follow on this acquisition. Our focus right now is just doing our due diligence and getting the funds together to acquire the ditch. And if that's successful, then there are other future capital projects that could happen that acquiring the ditch provides that opportunity. So our costs will be included in our FY22 budget requests. We have an estimate of about $990,000 to do this work. That includes both the direct compensation to the irrigation company, as well as the other work that the city would be responsible for doing. We think we can fund about $725,000 of that out of the transportation impact fees and water utility development fund associated with the build project and developing those wells in the Mullins-Tuckaine area. So that leaves us with a little bit of a gap. We still have about $265,000 that we need to raise, and we're really looking to partners to try to get to that total dollar amount. So we've been working closely with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. There's a grant opportunity for future fisheries grants that we think is a good potential, and the grant cycle is starting 1st of June, so good timing on that. We've also had Clark Fork Coalition and Trout Unlimited at the table, and they're both actively looking to find ways to help us with this. And we'll also be reaching out to private landowners. We've identified 16 different landowners that are non-shareholders on the ditch, but would benefit from closure of the ditch. So we'll be talking to them about potential contributions towards this effort. And there's some opportunities for in-kind services where we can share a little bit of the workload in getting this done. So, you know, conservatively, we think that the direct cost benefit of doing this is about 2 to 1. So the build project savings, the savings on the river work that would have to happen if the ditch remained in terms of doing a screen for fish on the intake, the value of the land and the value of the water rights. We think that a $1 million investment is worth at least $2 million in benefits. And that doesn't really even take into account the other benefits that are harder to quantify, but really reflect priorities of Missoulians, things like river health and recreation and safety. So it's a pretty interesting kind of extraordinary opportunity. It's rare that you get an irrigation company that's willing to even talk about something like this. And we found that our interests really aligned well, and they were a willing partner to try to work out an agreement. So next steps, like I said, we'll be doing due diligence. That's both legal and engineering due diligence. We'll have some stakeholder meetings. We want to talk to the folks that are affected and that may be potential partners in this. Putting together the grant application for future fisheries, and we're looking at other possible grant opportunities that come later. We'll negotiate a formal purchase agreement. Right now we have an offer letter, which gets the basic principles of what we're agreeing to down on paper and signatures. We'll need a formal agreement for the purchase. We'll be working on that. We'll need some landowner agreements. There are a couple of landowners that, rather than drilling new wells, we've worked out some other ways of providing them with irrigation water or future benefits of selling their shares to the ditch. And we'll have a budget request in our FY22 budget, and ultimately City Council approval probably later this summer, early fall. And you know, the 6-month timing puts us into October, November to get the final deal done and close on the acquisition. So that's what I have today. I'm certainly interested in any questions or comments you might have about it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for all your work on this and to everyone who gathered all the information about this opportunity. Let's see, Amber, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you, Jeremy. I'm just curious, how many irrigators are there that will be affected by this? Kind of where are they? And, have you talked to all of them? Just where are we kind of with the landowners that would need to be converted to wells?
So I'm off the top of my head, I think there are roughly 30 shareholders, and about half of those, or less than half, are still active irrigators. Importantly, it's the Hellgate Valley Irrigation Company that owns the water rights, and all of these landowners that use the water are shareholders in that. And so we don't have to negotiate with each landowner. We have an agreement, and the irrigation company their board has signed off on it, and the shareholders have also voted to agree to this offer. So from that standpoint, we don't need to do a lot of additional work with the landowners. They're all aware that it's happening, and the agreement also puts the responsibility of drilling those new wells and putting in pumps and all of that stuff. That goes to the irrigation company. We're paying a lump sum amount, and they will compensate each one of those irrigators based on their needs. We will be involved in the process of transferring the water rights, since after we do this acquisition, we will own those water rights, and we're agreeing to transfer them as needed to the irrigators that are going to continue on wells.
Madam Chair, may I just have a quick follow-up comment?
Sure.
Thanks, Jeremy. And the reason I ask about that is I have heard that there's some concern or some rhetoric going on that the city is cutting off irrigation to those people. And so while I understand that's not what's happening, I think it behooves us to be really clear on what that message is. And I just feel like we should be aware of that and sensitive to it. Thanks.
Thanks. Julie, go ahead.
I'll be brief. In the interest of full disclosure, I have been working with Jeremy and Logan and others on this in my capacity as a WGM Group employee. So I won't be voting on this when the time comes, but I have been intimately involved. And I guess to Amber's question and comment, I think there is one important thing to understand, and that is the ditch runs through a lot of people's properties, and only a handful of them actually own shares in the company. So only the shareholders are the people who are obligated, or who the company is obligated to deliver water to. There may be other people who have their pump in the ditch who don't have any shares in the company, but that is a clearly separate issue that's just kind of outside of the realm of this conversation. Thanks.
Yeah. Jordan.
Thanks. It seems like this would have some really significant water quality benefits too. We have a ditch running through, an urban environment in places, and I wonder if that's, if you could speak to that as well.
That's probably a little outside my expertise, but I can certainly see how that makes sense. The water does eventually return to Grant Creek and the Clark Fork, and if you're adding a lot of urban pollution or even just fertilizers and things like that, having that get back into the Clark Fork does create some issues for water quality.
I mean, it really seems like, Grant Creek is pretty significantly impaired in this area, and the goals to restore Grant Creek just go hand in hand with this. I mean, it's not very often, Jeremy, that you present us with something where you say the cost benefit ratio is a minimum of 2 or benefit cost ratio is a minimum of 2 to 1, and that's something that I would gladly get behind all day long. So I really appreciate all your work on this, and will be enthusiastically in support when the time comes.
Yep, great point. It wouldn't be before as if it didn't have a community benefit. So I appreciate that comment. Heather.
Hey, building upon Jordan's comment, the 2-to-1 ratio is a really positive thing. Jeremy, I guess my question to you, if we, well, I know you have limited dollars for those impact fees. Were there other projects that you had to weigh not supporting or funding in order to do this particular one?
That's going to be part of the process of looking at how to put this into our budget. Obviously, we need to make a decision between, is this something that is funded out of the build project funds and the special impact fee, or is this something that's funded out of a citywide transportation impact fee or other funds? So we'll take a closer look at that and really try to dial in the justification. But you're absolutely right. Anything we do is usually at the expense of something else. And so if we choose to spend money on this project, it could mean that other projects don't go forward as quickly.
Yep. Heidi.
I'm pretty excited about this project. I think it's a great opportunity to protect our water resources. Because ground or the ditches aren't a great way of delivering irrigation water. It gets dirty along the way. It's not the best water quality even by the time it's used for irrigation. And of course, tons of it evaporates. So I think using groundwater in many ways is, it's also a limited resource, but we are lucky to have an abundant aquifer for the time being. I think it's definitely a good option. I guess, Jeremy, I have a suggestion, and if you haven't done so already, I would recommend reaching out to the local food policy board to get to solicit some formal input on this to them, especially because it delivers water to what is at the moment still ag land, and just to make sure to communicate, what that agricultural future is in the build area, especially because I know an urban farm, for example, was something that came to the forefront of things that might happen in this area. So I think they're an important body to loop in and get comment from.
Thanks, Heidi. We'll do that.
Thanks, Heidi. And Julie, did you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah, real quick. We have Dale Klaus, who's one of the irrigation company board members in the meeting here, and I don't want to put him on the spot if he doesn't want to speak, but if he does want to speak, I'd love to give him the opportunity.
Yes. We don't have a lot of time, but I'm happy to take your comment, Mr. Klaus, if you want. If not, no pressure. And
I was just checking in to, see what's going on in this process. And, our ditch company is pretty well all in favor of going along with Jeremy and moving this forward. So we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions, and I think it's a good project for everybody. Thanks for all your help.
Thank you. Okay, we are almost out of time. I just want to say thank you, Jeremy, again, and everyone who has been working on this opportunity. This area of town is where a lot of our development is slated to go. So I think it's important to see it as an investment in that area that could aid in that additional growth for our community. So thank you. And for the record, I want to mention Hess, Merritt, and West are present, and we do have our minutes to approve now that we have quorum. So are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, those will stand approved. And that was our only item on the agenda. So with that, we adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jeremy.